Okay, so before we start scribbling today into boss creatures, I want to tell you my materials that I'm using. So my moleskin sketch pad right here, and then I'm using a Staedtler 4B. So typically I either use Tombow or Faber-Castell, but I went to the art store today with my boys and I want to experiment a little bit. So I got the Lars Lumograph black pencil. Now I have used this in the past, and quite frankly, I forgot about this one, and I forgot how much I loved it. So it's made in Germany, so you know it's good quality for the pencils, and we're going to jump into it. All right, first things first, we're going to do 2 scribbles today of boss creatures. So if you're drawing along with me, which I hope you are, make sure that your pencil's sharp, and we're going to do 2 ground planes. One over here, and one over here. Okay? Pretty easy, right? And I'm going to go as far as numbering them. Just because it's a habit that I've gotten into over the years, and it's treated me well. Next, we need to figure out what kind of boss creature we actually want to do. Now, for my lessons on my channel, I kind of lean towards either insect or more mammalian and or large lizard. So I thought, hey, what it would be fun today is if we combine those two. But we're going to put a little Lovecraftian horror into it and make something truly large. This is a boss creature. And you know, the funny thing is I started to become super nostalgic about old school Super NES games and Nintendo 64 and all of them. For those of you old hats in here, please comment below if you remember Super R-Type. Super R-Type was that awesome space shooter game, and I think they made part 2 and part 3. Man, what a game, and it was ahead of its time. You know, we had this little, here, I'll do a little sketch. It was side-scrolling, so we had a little TV screen here, and then we had, you know, you're in that little ship, and then you fight alien stuff that looks straight out of Contra. And speaking of Contra, that's my favorite game of all time. And I used to beat that on a bad day when I was like 8 or 9. But anyway, here we are having fun with this big boss creature. Now, because we're only doing 2 scribbles today, we're going to be spending a little bit more time on them. Now, when you're doing these shapes, let's say you're new at this process, and you're starting to scribble and you're placing lines in here, and you have no idea what you're doing, when to stop, how to start, what pencil to use, pen even. Well, let me break this down so that it's easy for you to understand. These shapes that you're sketching here with all of these crazy overflowing lines, they do come together, but this takes patience. All right, now typically I like to hold my cell phone out and time it 3 to 5 minutes, or 2 to 3 minutes, you know, whichever one makes you more comfortable. And in that time, you are going to draw a full-fledged thumbnail. So in this round, since we're only doing 2, we have a little bit more time to concentrate on what makes each thumbnail sing, what makes it awesome. All right? And I just want to tell everybody now, you can only go up from the thumbnail stage, meaning it's impossible to screw up. There's no finalized illustration here. We haven't passed this down the pipeline. No client has to okay this one. No, it's just your brain getting the lines out on paper and your hand allowing that to happen. What started as like a little alien, now it looks like a giant plant even. Speaking of plants, I often tell my students if they want an extra, I guess, set of awesome references to do for creature thumbnails, study exotic plants. There's just something really old school and organic about it. We've been seeing plants all of our lives, and let's admit, some of them look really exotic, pretty crazy, especially those of you that have traveled around the world and you've seen these things in person. They offer really unique shapes too. Now, when I was with Snail Games, I was working with a colleague that specialized in the foliage and the forest and the alien plant life that grew on in different biomes. And we would bounce ideas off each other while we explored these different biomes. We would do volcanic, post-apocalyptic. We would do forest. We would do wasteland, volcanic, like all of these different types of biomes, desert. And the creatures and the plants ended up resembling each other. It's pretty cool. So you can see here that we're really starting to collect a nice array of lines here. And unbeknownst to me, because, I'm just scribbling this stuff down, these shapes started to emerge. All right, these little bursts, it kind of looks like tree roots and the underside of cabbage. I don't really know what's happening yet, but already I'm pretty excited about it. Now I'm going to darken up this ground plane here. I'm not going to do a human scale yet, simply because I don't really know how big this thing is compared to a human, but it is a boss. And when I'm thinking of a boss character, it not necessarily has to be hulking and huge and overpowering and taking up a lot of space. But I want this one to be doing that. All right, now, since I'm doing this and I'm filling these spaces up, I'm going to actually go to number 2 now. The reason is because I don't want to become too myopic, like too obsessed about just one thumbnail that I'm doing. So I'm going to let my brain rest. I'm going to come over here to this side, and we're going to do it again. But I don't want to start it the same way. So look at your sketchbooks right now and ask yourself, what types of lines did you start this thumbnail with? So over here, maybe start it with something else. I'm going to do a bunch of weird vertical lines. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in a bunch of ovals. Because why not? This creature doesn't live on Earth. It probably lives in some kind of weird dimension. I might be drawing a giant, I don't know, like a dozen roses. I don't know what's going to happen. But this is the fun part. I'm already getting visions of eyeballs and weird tentacles hanging down from venom sacs. Like this might be a floating boss. I'm not sure. As a matter of fact, now that I think of it, I haven't really drawn many floating creatures before. Flying, yes. Swimming and jumping and leaping, yes. But never actually defying gravity and just floating. Wouldn't that be cool? And I mentioned Super R-Type earlier. There was plenty of floating intergalactic beasts in that game. I missed that game. It was so cool. I used to get really angry because my stepbrother could beat it at the time, and I could not. I was 14 years old, 13 years old, and I was really angry. He was older than me. He was good at all those games, and I was pretty good. I got really, really good at Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat, I used to obsess about it to the point where I would bring the fatality and the combo moves to the arcade while I was doing it. Yeah, I had like a little printout, like a little trapper keeper, quote unquote. Yeah, don't laugh. Comment below if you remember doing this stuff. I would print this stuff out because, we got like Game Pro in the mail. We would get Nintendo Power. We would get all those awesome magazines, EGM magazine. See, folks, this is way before Xbox and PlayStation, all that. Okay, so this one kind of looks like a giant bacteria, which I'm all for, and right off the bat, I think I'm pretty interested in this one. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's this large one with the other shapes playing into it. So maybe this is like the main brain, with these be like little areas for mandibles coming down. Maybe it'll just eat you up. But I'm not dismissing this one yet. No, because I think, it would be a good time to take each one of these to a secondary sketch, like a refined sketch. That's the thing about concept art. So as a concept artist, our job is to solve problems and to not be too married to one design. Okay, so if we let our emotions control our portfolio, we're going to have a bad portfolio. Or we're going to have a bad experience creating the work, because we don't want to become too emotionally attached to the work that we think is good, but we kind of know sucks to everybody else. So we have to allow ourselves to be like, okay, I drew a really good sketch here, but I'm totally capable of drawing 5, 6, 7, 8 different versions of it that will be better. So just remember that, because we had to do that back in the day during transportation, when I was in university. No matter how many cars we drew, we have one really awesome side view, or I did, and then turns out that it wasn't that awesome, and the perspective was terrible, so I had to go back to the drawing board quite literally. So that was a lot of fun. I really mean it. It was a lot of fun. It was hard. It was fun. Same thing with concept art. It's hard, especially if you don't want to become too emotionally attached. This one, okay, so now I think we have a main theme here. Maybe this is the brain. Maybe this is how it sees, and then maybe these are like larger areas on the body that has eyeballs too. Maybe there's little appendages that come down and they have like hooks on there. Oh man, now we're getting into it. Now we're getting into it, folks. Look at this. I'm just going to darken this just a little bit, because this is pretty exciting. It feels straight up alien. Yeah, like a little cove right there with some rib cages showing. All right, so I'm going to keep working on this. I'm really liking this one. And hey, I don't have to finalize that one. No. The way I look at it, I'm excited about number 2. I had to do number 1 in order to get to number 2. So those of you that have filled up entire pages before and you're unhappy with all of the results, just know that maybe the very next one you're actually going to be happy about. Just remember that. Sometimes it takes 35, 36 different thumbnails to do before you get to that one and you're going, yep, I'm glad I did those other 30, because number 31 is the one. And it rocks. And the client likes it, you like it, which in turn makes you do a better job on the final. That's what you gotta remember. Okay, so I think the other thing that's gonna make this pretty mysterious is there's gonna be no face. I think I want this to be totally alien. I'm already thinking of Annihilation with Natalie Portman. I know that movie kind of confused a lot of people based on the finale, but I think the entity in there, the alien entity, was just remarkable. Just an overall really, really cool movie. Everybody knows about that bear. The bear scene. Yeah, that was pretty terrifying. I won't give anything away, no spoilers. Go see Annihilation. Well, rent it, I guess. It's out. It's been out for like a decade. Okay. This one's pretty cool. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit more to this up here just to get a flow of the organic shapes. And then we're going to tie this, bring this down to here, and then I'll show you guys how to refine the thumbnails that you have. Now, as we get to this point in our concepting journey, sometimes in these bigger sketches that we think we're refining from older versions, we actually start doing things that we think are cool that we want to add back to our other drawings. And as I was doing this one right here, I noticed that I turned this into a giant eyeball, and in the center, it's an extra set of eyelids, to the point where the entire thing turned into a giant brain with an eyeball in the middle. Cool. I'm totally for that. It feels very Lovecraftian and otherworldly and alien. But I'm kind of wondering what this would look like back here if I did the same thing. So I'm just going to add in an eyelid. Just something really simple. Maybe not as many as I have here. It's almost like 1 is up here for the skin flap, 2 for the protective barrier, and then 3, something in the center there could be the pupil. All right, maybe we'll put in a smaller one right there as it's looking down at our at our little friend here. Not going to lie, I kind of like that now that I've gone back to this one. See, this is what happens in concepting, and we got to embrace this because not only is this fun, but it's opening your project up to have even more ideas than you thought. And this is what concepting is all about. So what I'm doing now, I'm kind of evaluating which one I want to go with. Here, I added in this center line, and it kind of split this thing into two. It's almost like two halves of a brain, some kind of creature brain. Over here, it feels like the brain itself has some oblique muscles with a rib cage and such. The only thing that we really haven't concentrated on yet are the tentacles. Now, with the tentacles in a creature like this, I want to give the tentacles purpose. I don't want to just hang a bunch of crap off of the creatures and say, hey, here's the tentacles. They're coming out of random spots. No, we have to give this thing thought. Remember, this is a boss creature. So if our little fella here has magic, if he has some kind of firepower or a team behind him, they're going to start shooting lasers at him and throwing rocks. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. However, this guy or this thing is going to have to fight back. Now, it's probably going to whip back with some giant tentacles here, and at the ends of the tentacles, there may be some serrated edges. You know, maybe these have some hook-like features right there, like big spikes, and you can just kind of slap the enemies with. You know, we could even go octopus and just put a bunch of suckers here, but we'll see. You know, this is the blue sky phase. Okay, this is the previs stage of our concepting journey on it. So look down to see what you're doing right now, and ask yourself, what's the purpose for your boss creature? Does it look strong? That's the other thing. One thing that kind of, well, I wouldn't say plagued my art for years, but a neglect that I had is the scale reference to the creature. You know, this thing could be the size of a small dog, and you can have, it wouldn't look like a boss at all. But if you put these little people in there, you'd be like, okay, because then we put, maybe this character that we have right here has a companion. Okay, two little companions next to it, and they're about to battle this freakishly big Zoid thing. And that's what's going to make it feel epic. But where do we go from here? Well, I'm going to go to my next sketch. I'm going to go down here, and I'm just going to see if I can start pulling together ideas from this one and ideas from this one. Now, I do like these two big rounded sections. So I think I'm going to do a front view of this one with this one in mind. All right, I like the position of this head/eye more than this one. This is a little too large, so I'm thinking of a smaller one might be a little creepier. And I'll kind of square this one off a little bit. Maybe I won't. So now that I'm trying to venture around this thing, I'm going to start putting in the oval. Notice how I gave more space here in the back to try to mimic like a hunchback, or just to show more back in general. There we go. Kind of like a heart, like the big heart of the civilization that it is. Maybe it is a giant heart, and maybe it telepathically controls the blood of all the other creatures. So I think one of the main things that will make this creature stand out is that eyeball. I think it's a super eye. I think it has a lot of powers, and the little characters that are about to fight it aren't really aware of its power. So I'm thinking way back in the day when I used to play Contra, those 80s people that grew up in the 80s. You know what I'm talking about with a video game. Okay, so here I'm starting to darken up the eyeball area, and I'm immediately getting Contra vibes. So I mentioned a game that I used to play, Super R-Type, 1 and 2, and I think they have 3. This is way back in the day. But even farther back, I grew up playing Contra. And the thing about Contra, were the giant aliens that we could fight. They basically looked like xenomorphs and among other things. Remember Invaders from Mars, which is another awesome movie that I saw by Tobe Hooper. But you got these big brain anomalies, and they had powers. So the eyeball, I don't want to make it like a human eye. Instead, we can give it 3 little dots in here just for fun. Where am I getting the number 3? There's power in the number 3. So those of you drawing creatures right now, or animals, characters, whatever, if you segment things off in 3s, it tends to add a little bit more interest to it. I think I went over this in some previous videos here. So 3 tentacles, 3 toes, 3 wings on a spaceship that you're drawing makes it more sci-fi. 3 eyeballs makes it immediately more alien instead of 2, which were what we're used to seeing on Earth from most animals. Things like that. So right now it looks like our, oh man, he just looks high. Well, maybe that's what's going on with our creature right now. Trying to fight it, and it's just high. Okay, so now we got the little ribs showing on the side. We don't want to commit to a ton of detail. But as I got this going, let's move down here a little bit. Okay. So here's the thing, folks. This is me just thinking aloud as I'm drawing. I can't help but go back to the original drawing. I just can't help it. Because I think I really had something there. And I think there's potential in these too. Don't get me wrong. These feel more structured. These feel more structured, definitely. But when I look at this, something just comes to mind of this thing is not only not from the Milky Way galaxy, it's from a galaxy in another dimension. It could be an alternate universe. I was going to say galaxy far, far away. That would be too cliche. But maybe it is. You know, maybe it is from a galaxy far, far away, or some kind of rip in time. I think that would be kind of cool. So I want to have these tentacles coming down, and maybe there's some holes right here, because remember, we got to give that thing purpose. Like, does it shoot out lasers? No, but maybe there's some organic canisters, organic cannons on the side here, and it just shoots out venom. That'd be kind of cool. Okay, I think we're getting somewhere. Definitely looks like a brain bug. Those of you that seen Starship Troopers, we got the brain bug going, but that was more of a tiny little eye for the Cyclops on the brain bug. Okay, we'll split that in half. We're not ruining anything. We're just trying to give this thing structure. Now, in my previous short, I did mention that asymmetry is very important when it comes to designing interesting creatures. There's beauty in symmetry too. I mean, don't get me wrong. You don't have to make everything you design asymmetrical. No. But if you want to be different, if you want to be alien, I guess you could say, asymmetry does kind of help. All right, so what do we have here? So we have, some space down here that we can hang maybe some grippers. Maybe these things kind of pick up their prey. But now we got a different kind of character there. I think we're losing the whole intent of this entire creature. Remember, we got an untapped thumbnail over there. Here's the thing, though. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I am actually going to use this one, and I'm going to flesh out some of these parts to make it more believable. And I've now done 4 thumbnails, and in doing so, out of these 4, I feel like I've become too predictable with these. So, my thought, why don't we go back to the drawing board? Quite literally. This one I've always come back to, and I just feel good about it. my philosophy whenever I do thumbnail sketches, and I've said this before in many videos, when you're analyzing your thumbnails to come up with a final design, your gut will tell you which one that you are emotionally attached to the most. Not emotionally attached to like adding too much detail at first, no. But when you have to become your own art director and self-edit and just come back to a drawing. Because I'm looking at this right now and I believe that this one has the most potential. Comment below and tell me which one you like. Okay, so that's number 2 up there. We'll do number 3 there, and then we'll have 4 here. Now these two, they have a lot of potential, especially this one. I like that angle. Okay, this front one, he's kind of looking down at our friends here. We can already do a cool little scene, can't we? So I think let's add some detail onto this one, and I'll go at a different angle so you guys can see it. And then let's see what happens. All right, everyone. I want to show you what I'm going to do to this. Okay, everybody. We're at that point where I'm going to choose this particular thumbnail. So we're not going to go down here and do another image. I'm going to follow my gut instinct because it's telling me to go with this one. And you're going to watch me in real time as I apply my shading and I start bringing out these forms. And I'm going to be using 2 pencils this time. So those of you that are needing a little refresher, I have my Staedtler Mars Lumograph Black 4B pencil. And, sorry for shaking the camera there, good old-fashioned Prismacolor Black PC 935. This is not the Verithin Black Prismacolor. That is an actual pencil, which is this one. This is the Verithin. All right, so it says Noir 747 Black. So what the difference is this one up here is the actual wax-based colored pencil. Okay, this is still great. These are still great, the Verithins, but I like this one because I'm gonna get very dark in certain areas. So remember what I said earlier about finding places around the body where you have to give it purpose, and I'm gonna have to do that. You know, there's probably going to be ventilation holes in here or some kind of intergalactic biomechanical gun that's poking out. Don't know, but it's going to be asymmetrical. It's not going to be normal. So without further ado, I'm going to play a little music. Draw along with me and really study, watch me, how I apply the gradation and the overall design. All right, let's jump into it. Oh, hey, you didn't think I was going to leave you hanging and just listen to music again. I'll talk through this process right here because I was originally going to redo this Zerg thing into a new drawing, but I was so happy with the way this thumbnail turned out. You know, I couldn't deny my gut feeling about it. And I think that I'll take some time to talk about some questions that I get a lot of on our channel. So one of them is, am I going to do more in the Pokemon series? I believe it was over a year ago I did a video where I transformed a Pokemon character into something scarier. And I do know that quite a few content creators, well, artists, do this. They take them and then they make really awesome looking, mean, demonic looking creatures. And it was fun. So I haven't done that in a while, and I think I will. Another question I get is, when am I going to do robots and machines and teaching people how to do robotic joints? Oh, please, folks, I will be doing them. And I thank you so much for those questions, because sometimes I just get so enthralled by drawing insects and scary stuff that I often forget about the robotic stuff. And ironically, my background in schooling anyway was industrial design, so I definitely want to, touch space and go back to some hard surface. It was a lot of fun, especially vehicles. So when you look up here at the sketch that I'm doing, I'm taking all of the light lines that I had originally done in there, and I'm adding shadows to them. So it's having the outline ready and then adding a little bit of value on top, going back, shadowing in the nooks and crannies and valleys, and I'm just letting the shapes kind of emerge as they go. Which actually piggybacks into the next question that I get often, very, very often, probably more than anything else. Am I looking at reference when I do these videos, or am I just making them up in my head? And the answer is yes and yes, no and no. What the heck does that even mean? Well, when it comes to strange alien shapes like this, honestly, I just make it up. I just make it up because I love organic
shape shifting and drawing and veins and muscles and everything. My technique is, if I draw a muscle or some kind of weird rooted biomechanical shape, I see what type of lines look good bursting out from that shape. Yes, it's a study in shape language. It's years of experience doing this, yes. But at the same time, it's practice in knowing what looks good against what doesn't look good. So let me give you an example. Some of you may be drawing right now as you're watching this video, and your creature lines don't look good. You don't know what type of neck shape should hold the head that you're drawing. Or, I can do the head and neck fine, but how big should I make the shoulders? Should I give the creature a hunchback? My feet are always small. My feet are always large. That right there, I hate to say, there's no shortcut to it. It's just every day, every other day, just devote some time to studying animals. So the lines that I'm putting in the creature right this second on those tentacles, I have studied so many aquatic creatures, it's ridiculous. And it just gets to the point where you memorize it and you don't have to look at it anymore. It's as simple as that. There are things that I do have to look at. If I draw a dog or a quadruped with paws or something, I have to look at photos, because I still kind of mess up the joints of both cats and dogs. I do feel a little better about hooved animals, just because the joints and the creatures that I grew, or the creatures I drew growing up tend to have hooves. It was either lizard legs or hooves, just because of my obsession with dinosaurs. And then, of course, hooved animals, just because those types of feet were just fun to draw. So it's just memorization and drawing it over and over and over again. Now look up here at the drawing. I started to outline the shape, and I'm slowly putting in some shading over top of the lines that I already had. I'm also thinking hard about what I want to include. Yeah, it's very tempting to jump right into details, isn't it? It's super tempting, especially if we get this idea in our head, we know exactly what it's supposed to look like on the paper. And then when we start drawing it, it is terrible. It looks nothing like what we were thinking. And then we question our ability to design these things in general. Okay. So this is when I don't think I'm using the black Prismacolor in this one. I can't remember this spot. No, I think the black Prismacolor was for the vent holes. So I tried to give this thing as much purpose as I could. You know, the otherworldly Space Invader type feel. Maybe venom shoots out of that. Maybe there's acid, some kind of lasers. I don't know. But remember what I was talking about earlier about purpose. So those tentacles hanging down, I mean, don't get in front of this thing. This creature is going to use all of those tentacles to try to attack its foe. And in this case, we have our three little friends looking up at this thing going, how am I going to beat it? We have no firepower, so we're going to need some help. Not sure what's going to happen. All right, so look down at your sketchbooks right now. And if you're adding details to your drawing and you're shading and doing all of that, try not to shade the entire thing the same way. So what I mean is, look at the giant eye and the creature that I'm sketching. Notice how the eye is getting most of the core shadow. You see how that center part sticks out more than anything else? Everything that encircles that area is secondary. And all of your creatures should have a focal point. Same thing for characters. those of you listening right now, or you're making a character for your portfolio, hiring managers are going to look at that character and they're either going to be bored in 5 seconds or they're going to be intrigued. So you got to give us something that makes us want to keep looking. That was the whole point of drawing that strange eye to begin with. If I didn't put the eye in any of these thumbnails, it would literally just look like a giant mucus sac just hanging off a tree or something. We've seen that 250,000 times in movies and games. All right, so we got to make this feel a little different. Now, have we seen things with giant eyes? Yes. But we had to give it a focal point so that we can disperse our interest from the center and go out. I noticed if you look behind the creature, how I kind of indicated large brain sacs on the left and right. Yeah, I go over this again when I go back to my narration, my normal narration. But I remember drawing that and going, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. So I just left it. I didn't put any details in after that. Instead, I went straight to that, like the 3 or 4 cannon gun on our left. I'm starting to think that the creature's right shoulder probably houses all of the acid, and it's looking at our little fellows down there going, yep, you better move, because this is my domain. The other thing that I want to mention is when you're sketching and you're not quite sure how to put details on certain shapes, like you don't know where to start because there's a lot of lines happening and stuff. Something that I mention often is look at the shapes that appear darker than others. So when we start sketching these thumbnails, some of the lines will show up more than others, and it's just by chance, just because no matter how much practice you get, it's impossible to keep the same pencil pressure across the whole drawing. So when you're doing these quick thumbnails, some shapes are going to stand out more than others. Use that to your advantage. You'd be surprised what happens when you just start shading in a certain area. And let's say you do 3, 4, 5 passes and it's starting to look smooth. The texture that your pencil gives actually forms veins and valleys and muscles. It's really cool. You just have to take a step back and really study it. Sometimes it just happens. It happens, and I'll be honest, folks, it's more of a happy accident than anything. These organic shapes that I'm drawing, they weren't planned, other than the large silhouette of the creature in general, like the big triangle shape. Everything happening inside of the silhouette, it's just me shading, seeing what lines pop out, and I'm just kind of going with the flow. To me, that's the most freeing type of art, when you just sketch and you just kind of go with the flow and not obsess about this like it's a school assignment or something. You're going to get an F if not done correctly. Well, kind of brings me to something I want to mention. If you are doing concept art for school, I'm pretty sure your teachers are still going to appreciate you going the extra 9 yards and giving them something that they haven't seen before. I think you owe it to yourselves to not hold back. We as concept artists tend to hold back because we're afraid of what we could invent. In turn, it makes us fear of being criticized about what we come up with. So every time that I mentor and I teach and I go to workshops, I'm always telling creature designers and character designers, go all out. It's so much better to add too much and have to dial it back versus doing something boring right out of the gate. You lose interest immediately, and then you don't know what to add. It's kind of like it's a self-defeating mechanism that we have in our art. A typical method to do creature design is you choose 3 different species of animals. Okay, you get a primary animal, a secondary animal, and a tertiary animal. Primary being the main body type that you're going to use for influence. Secondary animal is like a species of animal that has some cool attributes about the body. Hey, this one has wings, horns. This one has a tail. Look at the large claws. Look at the basilisk lizard, with the head crest and everything. And then tertiary would be, hey, cool stripes, or hey, look at the gullet and the neck, cool teeth, cool eyeballs. Tertiary details. So find out your primary, secondary, and your tertiary species, mix them together, and it helps a lot. Hopefully you're getting a lot out of this. I'll play with time lapse here and there. So actually comment below if you like time lapse, if you want to see me do more of it, because I've tried to go the extra time here on purpose. I want my videos to feel like you're just walking into a classroom, walking down the hallway, seeing the teacher draw. Come draw with me, bust out your sketchbooks, let's do it. I just feel like I feel like we don't get to do that much anymore. Everything's turning digital. Nothing against digital work. I'm on Photoshop every day. But there's just something freeing and organic and raw about, let's get my pen, let's get my pencil, let's get my sketchbook, and let's start doodling. Okay, so we're kind of winding this down here. So after this narration section, pause the video, go get a drink of water, subscribe if you want to, if you found this useful. And I'm going to finish the video off with some, hopefully, words of wisdom. And then I'll let you guys draw after the video's done. But hopefully you enjoyed this. I had a blast. I love drawing this kind of stuff. Comment below. Tell me what you want me to draw. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to be doing more cryptids too. Oh, yes. All right. Let's do it.
All right, so here we are after a pretty lengthy detail session. So when it comes to finalizing a thumbnail sketch that you already have and not just completely redrawing one, we have to go back and make sure that the edges are actually readable. And in this case, most of the edges are not once we get over here. Now those two absolutely massive brain shapes that I put in the back, I was getting very excited just constantly looking down at this one. I'm like, oh, what if we put the brain shapes in there? So I'm going to keep those ghosted. Ghosted as in very light. There's going to be no detail at all. But one thing that I kept putting details on is this strange multi-cannon biomechanical gun coming off of the body. So I'm going to keep that, but we need to know where the edge is. So we're just going to move the pencil down here just to make sure that I give some kind of outline. Now, since this is a thumbnail, it's a more detailed thumbnail. The refinement doesn't have to be picture perfect. All right, and then the belly, I guess you can say, we're just going to have it wrap around here. Now, an area that I'm going to need to do some thought over is what's going on under there. So remember when I was talking about asymmetry and how important it is? Well, I was talking about asymmetry in the short that I posted, like with the demon head. It's good to add some variety and also some intrigue and wonder in your designs instead of just being so flat and even on both sides that it becomes boring. So the right side of this creature has a giant weapon, and this weapon, it's starting to point directly at the figures down here about to fight it. Now, it could be that these figures were walking along in this forsaken land, and they walk upon the layer, for this creature is living. Okay, and the creature emerges from the mist, and it starts to come this way. And they're already standing there, and they're going, what in the world is that thing coming through the mist like that? Lo and behold, we have the giant boss. Okay, so if I wanted to show the mist and everything, down here it's pretty ambiguous. So I'm just going to take some of the pencil And I'm going to run it across everything, but it's going to be slightly darker than everything. So it's going to be like if you're, playing a video game, or you see this in movies a lot, where the swamps and humid backdrops where characters are walking, just really eerie settings, and the mist looks like these bands of moisture that kind of hover over wet areas. I'm going to have that in there so that the mist itself just flows right into the edges of the creature. But look at this tentacle right here. So the tentacle, even as random as it may sound or seem, it's growing out a specific body part. So somewhere over here, where we don't really know what that is, but we do know that this giant area is housing the muscles necessary for that tentacle to come out. This is faded off. There's no detail on it. As a matter of fact, I can make the edge pretty fuzzy, and the fuzz can just be shaded off of there. However, in the front is when I need to start getting a little darker, because that tentacle is in the front of everything. And these sharp little barbs coming off. I shouldn't say little. I mean, these things are larger than the characters. They're sticking like right in the faces of our friends down there. So I'm going to darken the tentacle right here. And that's going to make it seem like it's in the forefront. Like the alien being is trying to scare them, but not necessarily hurt them. Kind of like pressing things out of the way. And we're hinting at little areas down here. So I'm just going to put some shadows, and then I'm going to leave other shadows fainter, so it's not going to be as obvious. Now here's an interesting part. This is what happens when you shade and you have dark areas, light areas, white areas, dark areas, all that combined. This area does not feel like it belongs to the creature. So what I have to do, see this core shadow right here? I'm going to run my pencil over everything, even the details that I put down there, until I get to the edge right there. See how dark the outline is? That's how dark the shading is going to be to the right of it. And I'm going to fade it right back into the body. And all of a sudden, it looks like it's actually attached to it. Now, there's a lot of cool things that can happen within that shadow. That shadow could have indications of smaller body openings and crevices and holes. Just really neat stuff happening in there. This is my concentration right here. All right, this is the alive part. And I want this to seem like it deserves the attention. It's kind of like how the day the Earth stood still, if you've seen that with Keanu Reeves. All right, so now I want some of these to kind of poke out, so I'm just putting shading under it. Strange little body pore under here, under this strange Metroid gun. I'm just going to call it a Metroid gun. I want that to be in shadow, because it's going to be casting the shadow down there. So I'm just going to flatten the paper off right here. I'm adding shadow to it. Yeah, that actually looked good, didn't it? Look at that. Pretty cool. All right. Right under here. But I'm going to do this lighter than I was across the body on the other portions. Remember, atmospheric perspective. This is key. Okay. There we go. So this is how we add details, everybody. And, these little tentacles out here, this could be purposefully not fleshed out yet. Okay, this is wonder. This is excitement. This is what the heck am I looking at? But you still kind of know what you're looking at. All right, it's this massive beast, and they should not have crossed its path. Over here, we have a tentacle that deserves to be a little darker, just a little, and I'm going to run that to the body as it connects to it. We don't want any random floaters in there. We want to make sure that this creature knows what it's doing with all of its tentacles. That one needs to be a little darker because it's in front of the body and we would lose it. if we didn't do that. And also the reason that works is because this gigantic hulking body is casting a shadow against that. Maybe the light source is up here somewhere. Okay, there we go. We're going to darken the tips of those spikes so they show up. And we can even go in and start adding in some tiny little details too. You know, just to finish things off. And I'm pressing with the tip of my pencil, not on the side of it. I haven't sharpened it yet. I'm going to keep that little tip that I naturally made by shading and flattening off the sides of the graphite. There we go. If there's a shadow area and I want a spike to show up, then I will go grab my black Prismacolor over here, because black Prismacolor shows up over everything. That's why it's so wonderful. You get these little specks in here. You don't even have to worry about how dark you shaded. These things could even show up over 6B, 7B, and 8B. Like it's pretty awesome. And then what you do is you take the pencil and you do tiny little circular movements right where the spikes grow out of the skin. What that does is it makes the skin seem attached to the horns and the spikes and everything, which is what you want. You don't want this to be cookie cutter. You don't want these to be placed on top of the skin. You want it to look like they're actually growing from it. That's the beauty. Okay. Well, hopefully you've learned a lot in this little session today where we did some boss characters. You know, we started with number 1. It was kind of a warm-up. Started with number 2. We kept our eye on that one. We tried to refine it to number 3. Turned into a pretty cool brain creature. Wasn't satisfied with this one. Decided to do it in a slightly different angle. This one turned to be too predictable, yet could be a character for a later project. Then, while doing this, we got ideas to actually go back to our boss creature right here. And now we have our friends. You know, let's put some little rocks down here. Do like a little scene. Maybe some indications of some plant life. You know, some like little bushes. That'd be kind of cool, like a little rock right here. Because this thing is living and breathing in a world just like these little characters right here. Okay, and they're pretty screwed. Okay, I don't think they're gonna win. No, they might. I don't know. I don't know what kind of power they have, but I don't see them walking out of this. Comment below. Let me know. Do you think that these 3 little companions are gonna beat this right here? What would you name this thing? All right, it's gonna be fun. But what would you name it? So I want to thank everybody for coming along this journey with me. Comment below if this helped. And check the links in the description below for our Creature Design Workshop Discord. It's free to join the Discord. I have a mentorship, bobbyrebholz@gmail.com. And I also run a Patreon. So if you want to see me get into how I invent anatomy and what anatomy I study on a weekly basis, what animals, how I draw bones, how I draw the muscles attached to bones, how I make up muscle. Check the link in the description below for that. All right, folks. Thanks again. You are awesome. Peace.